I am Chris Deeroff. I'm representing the Gold Hill Fire Department. I'm on the fire board.
Oh.
And Bob, you didn't know that? You know now. Anyway, yeah, so we're, as a board in the fire department, just like unbelievably thrilled that Maya has taken it upon herself to get basically all of these people together to get some really, really important work done. As we all know, if we've lived in the mountains for any amount of time, especially in the last 10 years, we know that these ecosystems are changing because of climate change, right? It's getting hotter and drier. And how do we continue to live in these areas? Well, there is a lot of ways we can do that. And we can prepare ourselves better for that in a lot of different ways. And one is, going forward with some mitigation projects, and they'll get into the ecology end of it, hopefully. But as a forester and wildlands firefighter, I couldn't be more thrilled, not only because my house is on Pine Street, and I see fuel every day, and what that really means in this area, but just super excited that everybody kind of came together and all the hard work that's really come into this super important, and it's really what, the step in the right direction for what we should be doing up here to keep our town, literally keep our town. So anyway, this is Maya and Cameron. We're working with the Watershed
Boulder Watershed
Collective. I wanted to say coalition, but they've switched it up. So anyway, I'm going to hand it over to Maya, but thanks everyone for coming, and Gold Hill Fire Department really appreciates being here and all the support and work that everyone's done. So anyway, thank you again, Maya.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, yes, I'm Maya. I'm with the Boulder Watershed Collective, and we were formerly the 4 Mile Watershed Coalition, so it's confusing. We did a lot of flood recovery work in 4 Mile, and now we have expanded our geographical area into the Boulder Creek watershed, which includes part of Gold Hill and a lot of southern Boulder County. So we're really excited about this project. It is really a collaboration of many partners, including funding partners like the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the U.S. Forest Service. Am I in here? Mm-hmm. Sorry. Just want to get in the Zoom. And also a lot of other partners, including the Gold Hill Fire Protection District, as well as the town meeting, as well as CU students, and also working with a large collaboration of partners, including the U.S. Forest Service, Boulder County, City of Boulder. So we're really looking at landscape scale planning and landscape scale mitigation. And we're really working hard to integrate wildfire protection and the ecology piece for real holistic projects. So we are really fortunate to be working with some great landowners here in Gold Hill, who I think really value protecting their own properties, as well as really recognizing the community aspect of how everybody in Gold Hill is kind of connected on this landscape. So first I wanted to introduce Brian Chamberlain and Julian Blundell, who are CU grad students who are working with us on a few other projects connected to the mitigation, but a little bit different than that. So there you go.
Hey guys, Brian Chamberlain. Nice to meet everyone. Just want to say, first of all, a lot of you have met us over the course of the past week. We've been walking around town giving out our surveys and advertising this event, of course. But everyone has been super gracious to us and welcoming, and you've gone in your homes, you've fed us, you've given us water. It's really been a great experience, and I just want to thank you for that. So the point of the survey, if you can take it, great. I know a lot of you have the link. We have paper copies in the back if you'd rather do that with pre-stamped envelopes. So we're trying to understand your perspectives around wildfire risk and preparedness, and then we want to increase the pace and scale of forest management and mitigation projects in the area. So that's really the point of the survey. We are planning on doing other more formal interviews throughout the summer, and you'll just see us a lot. So please feel free to grab us and have a conversation with us, ask us about what we're doing, and we'd be happy to take the time to talk to you.
Absolutely, we'd love to get to know you and bug us with your questions and things like that. But we'll also be doing a number of other events throughout the summer. We're right now collaborating on a walk with Ben Foll from the NRCS, I believe.
From the Colorado State Forest.
From the State Forest, yeah. So he's going to take a walk through the treatment area to really give people a visual of what it looks like and sort of to imagine what's going to happen with the project area after. And if you have any questions there, that's also a really great place to get them answered and to learn more. I know they're going to do a good talk here, so it may be a little redundant, but if you have more questions that come up.
Do you know when that walk is?
Yeah, that walk will be July 2nd. And we'll also have a second opportunity July 31st. So we should have a few walks. And then we also have we'll also have a community visioning event, and we'd really love everyone's perspectives there. That's just to get people talking about what it will mean to live with fire for the next 5-ish years. That's kind of the scope that we're looking at. But we just want your brain power and your enthusiasm to sort of envision this world of what it means to live with fire and sort of talk through some of the problems and barriers to living with fire in the future. And so those will be in August, and we'll have the dates up on the Watershed Collective website pretty shortly. But that's mostly what we're doing, and we're really happy to be here and meet all of you. So thank you.
And then, okay, thanks you guys. Before we get started with all the foresters who are here today, I wanted to give the landowners an opportunity to say a few words. So this project is taking place primarily on 2 large parcels. I think we'll have a map. Is there a map? So you'll see a map in a minute, but it's primarily on the ashram property west of town, and then also Caroline Ashley's property, which kind of spans this northern piece. And then there's some smaller parcels in there, Mike's property. And so, yes, Sita or Caroline, if you wanted to say a couple of things, this is the opportunity. Sita, you go first. Do you want to come up here?
Okay.
Then we can get it in Zoom.
Wrote it down just in case. Our main message is that we're so grateful that this is happening. I've lived here for 45 years, and you don't realize over time how thick the forest gets. And all the years that we've been here, our master arranged that forestry work was continually being done. Oftentimes it was just limbing up trees that just, we created that huge fire break road and everything. So we're so grateful for Maya and team to have created this opportunity, and also always grateful to the Gold Hill Fire Department, the Gold Hill Town, and we don't consider ourselves the owners of the land, which I'm sure you guys can identify with, but the caretakers of the land. And, we're blessed to have 108 acres of incredible, beautiful Mother Nature that we want to care for. And lastly, we want to be able, the community to be able to share through wood. There's, as Frank was saying today, there's going to be way too much wood. But there's going to be wood, and we're leaving it entirely up to the town meeting and forest and the fire department to figure out how to dole that out or what to do with it all. We're keeping, for our wood stoves, but there's going to be way too much. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Caroline.
My name is Caroline Ashley, and I am the land steward of the north side of Gold Hill. I'm really happy you're all here. Shows great enthusiasm. We've been working on this project for over 3 years with Maya. her inspiration. I think we were all sitting here 3 years ago before COVID, right?
Yep, we did do that.
With the start of this, and look how it's progressing. It's super amazing. I'm really excited, you guys. Congratulations for Gold Hill, seriously. Secondly, I wanted to say that the enthusiasm needs to go out to the youth. So what I'm trying to do with our team is get people to volunteer cameras and videoing and taking time to map out everything and everywhere we're going. So we can educate the youth and take it to the schools and take it to the next step of firefighting and hopefully not fighting a fire, but mitigating the fire. But in case it does happen, right, that we can elegantly move and shift out of that panic state and go into the yoga state and you know, and take the practice into nature and really provide a willingness to understand how to work as a team and collaborate. So we've done that pretty darn well. She's amazing. She can manifest the most amazing things, Maya. So thank you to you, honestly. And then it's so good, and I want to thank the team personally to see you when I'm out walking, as you know I am every day, to say, hey, how you guys doing? Is that Caroline? So we're getting to know each other, and we're also very grateful that you're also respecting the project and how we're laying it out and keeping, you know, keeping it mitigated, monitoring, you know, our process and, you know, honoring the spaciousness in which to educate these people and get in there and without, you know, crossing the boundaries of where we want to go with this in a negative way. We want to stay real neutral about this. So if you do have any concerns, complaints, ideas, inspirations. Yeah, I'm not good at that. I can teach a yoga class, which would be super nice. So that's my part in it. I'm so blessed that we got the money to do it. We are so blessed that we actually manifested that kind of income. So we can do this. So let's do it together. Gold Hill, yay.
Okay, thank you. Mike, do you want to say anything? Okay, you're good.
I think we're all really thankful that that wood's going to disappear over there because the fires that have come up left hand, and that's been a big fear for a long time.
Yeah.
My house was toast.
Yes.
If it comes up that way.
Okay, now we are going to hear from the foresters. So there are 4 foresters here today. Who work with 2 different agencies. Frank Falzone with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Rob Walker, Scott Heffernan, and Ben Markle are with the Boulder Valley and Longmont Conservation District, and as well as Vanessa here. So really excited to hear from all of these guys about the actual project, and I'll just let you guys take it over from there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Super cool to be here. You know, I had never been to Gold Hill prior to about 4 months ago. So it's been really, really cool getting to know you guys and meeting some of you. I'm looking forward to meeting, you know, everyone in this room over time. Yeah, it's been a really cool process so far. So thank you, Maya, for having us here and including us in this. And yep, you did the introduction. So yeah, I work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Rob with the Conservation District. We'll be taking care of this presentation together. I'm really just going to kind of start us off with the first few slides. What we'll be talking about is a brief introduction of who are our agencies and what do we do. Rob's going to have a good crash course in forest ecology and forestry project development. And then I'll finish up with some specific information to our what we're calling our Gold Hill Forest Restoration Project. Awesome. So what is a conservation district? It's a local form of state government, similar to a school district or a fire district, and they are tasked with assisting private landowners in addressing their natural resource concerns, whatever those resource concerns might be. It might be kind of hard to tell, but you might recognize this photo to be of the Dust Bowl era in Colorado, southeast Colorado in the 1930s. That was kind of the event that gave rise to, at the time, the Soil Erosion Service, and later conservation districts, just slightly later. There are a lot of folks out farming the ground, trying to produce a crop, and they weren't really sure how to do that without losing all of their topsoil. So certainly that was a problem that a guy named Hugh Hammond Bennett, he successfully lobbied Congress to create the Soil Erosion Service in 1935. It's a really cool story. I recommend you guys look into it. So anyways, the Soil Erosion Service became the Soil Conservation Service, and in the 1990s, we became the Natural Resources Conservation Service to better reflect the wide variety of natural resource concerns we can assist landowners with. And the role that conservation districts play, they're really, on the ground, working with landowners, talking with landowners, learning about what sort of natural resource concerns are in their service area, and working with those folks to address them. So I'm kind of speaking here for the Boulder Valley and Longmont Conservation Districts. We got a bunch of them here today. So it's a little bit confusing. Basically, two separate agencies with one set of staff, two boards of volunteer supervisors, so I'm sure that makes everything super easy for the staff. Boulder and Weld counties are where they provide technical and sometimes financial assistance to do forestry projects, as well as a variety of agricultural-based projects and noxious weed mitigation. Those main programs that the Conservation District has are really a reflection of the most common natural resource concerns that we see in this service area. So, real quick sales pitch for conservation. If you have anything where you're concerned about your soil, water, air, plants, animals, or energy, NRCS or the Conservation Districts can chat with you on the phone or do a site visit or just give you the help that you might need. Okay, I'm to Rob here for forest ecology.
All right.
Okay.
So yeah, a piece of what we do is forestry now, and where the conservation district comes in, and our philosophy of forest restoration and forestry projects is that we are trying to bring the forest structure that we see around us right now, that's super dense, a whole bunch of trees, back to a condition that more closely resembles what it was before Euro-American settlement. On to the next slide. What we draw this from is a whole bunch of recent research. I guess you could call it our Bible, is the GTR 373, which came out in
373, no, it was a couple years ago. Yeah, before that was the 311.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I mean 2019.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2019. I couldn't remember either. But that lays out basically what a ponderosa forest looked like, which is over a broad scale, what most of the Front Range looked like. What a ponderosa forest looked like in the Front Range, and what sorts of ecology dominated. So getting into that a little bit, kind of a snapshot of the Front Range, where you go from the plains down here at Denver at about 5,000 feet and work your way all the way up to 14,000 feet at some of these peaks. You get into the alpine. And what you see is driven by a moisture gradient for the most part, moisture and temperature. As you move up the slope and further west, you tend to get more moisture in the ground. You tend to retain moisture, and you get cooler temperatures, which again helps to retain that moisture. So as you go up, you start getting more and more trees, which usually require moisture. Lots of water to get a tall tree growing as tall as it can. So just to kind of lay it out, basically down here in the plains, we see basically no trees except in riparian areas where there's a whole bunch of water. The Platte River would be an example of that. And then as you work up, you get more and more trees. Up to about 8,000 feet, you see individual trees, maybe groups of 2 or 3, maybe 5 trees as you get up higher, with a whole bunch of grassy interspaces. As you work your way up higher, that gets more and more dense. You get groups of, say, 5 to 12 trees. And then you hit the subalpine, which is very dense. I'm sure we've all seen that. Lots of spruce and fir. It gets very dense, and it's dominated by a different ecological regime than the lower montane. So if we move on. So what happened to that? What we see around us is much more dense than what I'm talking about here. Well, in a sense, we happened. We moved in because of gold. We saw that there was lots of opportunity to mine, to do agriculture, to bring in cattle, to bring in sheep, and do grazing. And we saw that all these fires that were coming in, fire is an integral part of the ecology here. All these fires coming in were threatening that. And I'll get into fires a little bit later, but so early in the 1900s, we started suppressing fire. We had a big campaign to really suppress fire and keep fire from spreading as best as we could, and we did a really good job of that until a few decades ago when the forests got really thick. We saw that here, we saw that in California, and we're starting to see really big fires that just cannot be controlled. To kind of continue with that, you can see the differences. This picture was taken in 1896, and this one in 2000. This is of the same place. This star right here is the same rock. If you look here, you've got individual trees, little groups of 3 to 5 trees. I'm not sure exactly where this is, but this is the Front Range. This was taken in the Front Range. But a lot of open space, a lot of grassy areas, lots of places for wildflowers to grow, for grasses to come in, for grazing for elk and moose. And then coming through here, we've got a lot less of that. We've got way more trees. That is because we've been suppressing fire. As fire comes through in this kind of environment, you've got very low intensity. It's mostly a grass fire. It burns very quickly, very hot, but it's too quick to really do any damage to any of these established trees. The trees that it does kill are the little saplings. So if you remove fire from that, all those little saplings that would have been killed become this. And then again, just another example. 1913 compared with much more recently, 2017, almost 100 years later. We've got many more trees. It's much more dense in here than it used to be. So again, back to fire. It's a native part of this ecosystem. It kind of like I said, it shaped the landscape. And as it shaped the landscape then, shaped how fire would roll through it. You didn't have as many trees in a low intensity grass fire. A lot of the little saplings are going to get eaten up in that, but the big healthy trees will be fine. You can. What's really cool about our job is you can go around and you can actually see some of the really old trees actually have fire scars on them from 80, 100 years ago when fire was a part of this landscape. And you can actually see that 160-year-old tree has a fire scar and it survived that fire because it wasn't so intense. So this was normal. down here in between the upper montane and the plains, you get low intensity fire every 1 to 10 years, and that would keep things thin. And that thinness of the forest would then perpetuate a low intensity fire in the future. Whereas in contrast, the subalpine usually burns much hotter. It's much wetter, so you get a lot more trees, and you would expect to see a much more intense fire up at elevation. On to the next one, and what we have now, because we've suppressed fire, we've got basically a subalpine fire regime here, where we've got big intense fires like Calwood, like Cameron Peak, like the Hayman Fire, that just obliterate everything. And that's okay up in the subalpine where all those plants are adapted for it, but these plants aren't. It's a very different sort of ecological regime. So what does that mean for the ecology? If this burns, what do we expect to see? Well, kind of to step back. What do we see as we suppress fire? Is what we see is increased uniformity. We've got a whole bunch of the same type of tree. They're all about the same age, because back when we started suppressing these fires is when those trees started growing. All those saplings are all about the same age, and now they're all still the same age. They're all the same size. So what you get is habitat loss, so animals that need different sizes of trees to live in or to hunt in. You've got much less of that because you've got a much more uniform forest. This also comes into play not only for fire, but for insects like bark beetles or other diseases like mistletoe. If you have a whole bunch of plants that are just right for a bark beetle or mistletoe, you're going to get a big spread very quickly. Like we saw, I believe it was 2003 and then 2013. We saw a couple of bark beetle outbreaks. And in a very uniform forest, you're going to see a big outbreak like that. After a fire, because it's not a matter of if a fire runs through here, it's a matter of when. After a fire, you're going to see impaired watersheds, loss of life, loss of property. We saw with Calwood, I think it was 24 homes were lost in that fire. This will affect irrigation water. I believe down in the plains they had to shut off their water for a while because it was full of soot. These forests then become rangelands. I think I saw a report that we're not expecting much forest recovery from the Hayman Fire for at least 1,000 years. Because it was so hot, it was so devastating that I think it killed the seed bank. And we're just not going to see a whole lot of trees regenerating. So it's going to become a grassland instead of the ponderosa forest that it was. Again, to reiterate, this doesn't just apply to fire. This also applies to pests, diseases like mistletoe, plant killing fungi. So if you can spread those out, if you can put some diversity into the forest, you can mitigate some of those effects. These beetles will only attack, the susceptible trees, and if there are fewer susceptible trees, it's harder for them to kill the entire forest. So to think about that, and the way that the Conservation District thinks about that is not, what can we do? It's what do we care about? What are we trying to preserve here? What are we trying to preserve? Go ahead. And we split it up. What do we like about our forest? We love that there's wildlife habitat. And these are all from just talking to landowners. People love that there's wildlife. People love the look of the trees. They like to go out and walk in their forest. They like to hike. Everybody's concerned about watershed health. We're in a very dry area of the country. So the better, and how can we prevent those threats from affecting what we like about this forest? So we think about it in an ecological sense over the entire landscape. What we've seen in a lot of the research is this was historically much less dense. Like I said, 3 individual trees up to groups of 3 to 5 in an area like this. But that can change over time and over space. So on a smaller scale, you might see like this site is historically very dry. This is a very dry site. So maybe there shouldn't be any trees here. Maybe it's not the best idea to have a whole bunch of trees here. Maybe this should be more of a meadow. Whereas, say you've got a creek running through here, it's much wetter. You're going to have just naturally a lot more trees there, which is okay. And it's that diversity of ecosystems across the landscape that will help to mitigate wildfire, pests, things like that. If a fire were to come through here, it's going to have a hard time jumping this because there are fewer trees, there's less fuel on this hillside. So that means down to basically just to hit it on the head, we have to cut trees. We have to cut a lot of trees. A lot of the projects that we do, we are cutting upwards of 60 to 80% of people's trees. Just because there are a ton of trees. And to get it back to the historical structure that it was, that means bringing it down to a much lower basal area and much fewer trees per acre. And again, that depends on the site, that depends on the property, and we will work with the landowner to teach them about the ecology of their site. And then also to listen to them about, what do they care about their site? Is there a particular part of their forest that they really want to keep, that they really love? And we can set up a reserve there and not cut any trees or cut many fewer trees there. Or if there's a special tree or a sacred area, we can avoid that area. And we can work with the landowner, find out what they want, what they really care about, and still have an ecological effect after the project. So just some examples of some projects. I've got 2 here with a series of 3 photos. One will be before. You can see how dense this is, and I want you to focus on this crooked tree right here. It'll be marked in each of these. So this was taken from the same site, from the same spot, looking the same direction. This is immediately after the project, after the loggers had come through. And it doesn't look great. What we like to tell landowners who are doing a forestry project is it will never look worse than it does on the last day of the logging. It always looks bad. There is slash everywhere. But I don't want to scare anybody off because on the next slide, this is just a year later. We get a huge grass response, a whole bunch of wildflowers. It's really amazing how quickly the ecology responds to even just opening it up to sunlight. And then you can see if a fire were to come through, you might get a tree or 2 to torch. If the fire weather is good enough, or is bad enough, I guess. But you're going to get much less crowning. You're not going to get a runaway crown fire because this is so thinned out that it just can't jump from tree to tree. And then same thing with this. Really dense. This was 2016. This was also 2016, immediately after the project. And then 3 years later, we've got, you know, nothing but native plants, grasses, and it's looking great. Again, a lot more space in between trees. You want to go back to the original? This was super dense. You can see little saplings everywhere. A lot of trees were taken out of these projects. All right, and now on to what exactly we're going to do here. So, Frank.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. Good job, Rob. Yeah, so you know, the lesson in forest ecology, I think, is absolutely critical to understand, as Rob said, why it is that we are cutting as many trees as we will be in these, you know, on these projects. In my mind, you know, there are two kind of strategies to reducing wildfire risk. You can take the fuel reduction approach, which is absolutely valid, especially in public spaces and around your home, just focusing on crown spacing and thinning from below and just kind of trying to reduce the mobility of wildfire. That's a totally valid approach. We take a little bit of a different strategy that we refer to as forest restoration, where our goal is to really, as Rob said, restructure the forest's structure and composition to better reflect the historical functionality of that forest. So we have benefits to wildfire behavior, but also wildlife habitat and just general health of the forest. Anyway, so here's our map. Maybe some of you guys have seen this map already. I know Maya's maybe sent it out a little bit. So I'm sure you guys recognize this a lot better than I do at this point, but here's the town of Gold Hill, where I think about right here, Carolyn Ashley's property, outlined in, well, I would say actually the project area, outlined in pink, with the Ashram property over there. Combined, we have a little bit over 100 project acres. Go ahead, Scott. Okay, so just kind of getting into what is this going to look like in terms of how are we going to accomplish what we're setting out to do? And Rob touched on this. You know, part of it we'll be hiring professional logging contractors to come in and make some noise. So that's a big part of why I was really excited to let everyone know that there's going to be log trucks around. There is very likely going to be use of a tub grinder to deal with slash. So, you know, this being a community-focused project, I think it's important that everyone kind of knows that there's going to be some sort of activity that might get in your way every now and again. You know, we're going to be strict with our log truck drivers and let them know that they need to be safe. Absolutely. Anyways,
Where's the grinder gonna go?
I believe that'll be parked up kind of in the central part of the Ashram property. So is Paul here?
He's not here.
Paul, okay. So I'm excited to work with the 4 Mile Mitigation crew. They're going to be handling some of the very steep ground on the north side of the Ashram property. Imagine some folks are familiar with that hillside. It's quite steep, and it's so steep that we couldn't get any sort of machines on that. But there's a fire road that switchbacks about halfway down the hill. If you could actually see the map. Awesome, thank you. So we'll be able to put in a fairly substantial fire break with a hand crew operating on this north-facing slope. Everything kind of south of here is very likely going to be a large-scale mechanized forest restoration projects with machines like feller bunchers and grapple skidders and big equipment that we need to accomplish this work. Yes?
The chimney right to the right, so
Yes.
Before I ask this question, nothing was really going to happen in that. Has that changed?
Yeah, currently we are not planning to do anything in here. So the ground is about as steep as it is here, but we don't really have any ability to remove the fuel from this chimney. So yeah, I mean, certainly this is a vulnerability as I see it. I've never met anyone with I believe it's called the Colorado Mountain Ranch here, but I think connecting the project units on this operable ridge, I think would be really fantastic to increase the efficacy of this project in the future. You know, forest restoration in Boulder County and the Front Range in general is really tough because the ground is very, very steep. So we're limited to basically where we can reach with ropes and cables and things like that. It could be possible to do what we would call a whole tree lop and scatter in here, but I typically wouldn't recommend it. I think the surface flame lengths would be extremely high, so I'm not sure what we would accomplish with cutting trees in here if we couldn't remove the main stem. Okay, thanks, Scott. Yeah.
Did you just talk a little bit about access? You mentioned logging trucks and stuff, so what kind of access will there be to those areas?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the Ashram property has amazing access with this road system here. They'll come right in, and you know, when we're doing these forestry projects, we develop what we call a landing site, and that's kind of like the centralized area where log trucks can access, get loaded up, turn around, head off the property. And on the Ashram property, there's quite a lot of opportunities for developing landing sites. Excuse me. Because of this kind of tight turn here, I'm anticipating the log trucks to mostly just be funneled out towards Netherland. There is a little bit of a road system here that if they do need to go that way, I believe that's possible. That'll be something we'll have to figure out, you know, that road access there. Onto the Ashley property, it's a little bit tighter for sure. You know, just the road right over here. I believe it's College. Is that what? Okay. So basically, I'm anticipating we're going to have a landing site in this area and along the road here where trucks can get in and turn around, and logs from across the project area are going to be skidded to this central landing site. It takes pretty industrious loggers to get this scale of work done, but they're out there.
So essentially then no new roads?
That is my expectation. There might be, you know, maybe they'll put a blade down in one little spot where they'll maybe need that to turn around more effectively or safer. But any sort of soil disturbance like that, where if we are putting a blade down, I don't even want to say that, I hope we don't have to, but that will be rehabilitated after the project. Yeah. Sorry, we'll have a Q&A after. Sorry, Rob can answer some of these too. Yeah, I've just got a couple more slides to get through. Okay, sorry. Here's some metrics. Ben, where is Ben? Thank you for the forest inventory you've done on the Ashram property. This is the data that came from that. So the process for developing these projects is we'll go through as a team and we'll work with the landowners, and we will look at every tree and decide, are we cutting this tree or are we keeping this tree? And we'll mark our keep trees. So the Ashram property is very nearly completely marked, and you know, there's a little bit of room now for fine tuning, so it looks perfect. But Ben did his inventory on Friday, and here's our data. So some of the main metrics that we focus on, you know, basal area per acre. Really quickly, what basal area means is if you were to cut a tree down at about this high and looked at that circumference, the two-dimensional circumference, and measured that in square feet per acre, that's basal area per acre, and it's a really common measurement of forest density. Currently, we're at 139 square feet of basal area per acre on the Ashram property, and that is you know, well beyond what we would refer to as the historical range of variability. That's much more dense, as Rob was saying, much more dense than you would really expect to see in the last 20,000 years or so. So the way we have this marked currently, we're going to do a fairly substantial basal area reduction down to about 45 square feet per acre. Trees per acre, we're going from 292 down to 49. That's about an 80% reduction in trees per acre. We use this software developed by the Forest Service called Forest Vegetation Simulator, and you know, you give it some input, and it tells you what type of wildfire behavior is expected in certain fire weather scenarios. So, you know, as expected in severe fire weather, in fire weather meaning how hot, how dry is it? we're going to have active crown fire in its current condition. Post-treatment. This is the big one. This is what we're looking for. We want to show through our fire simulator models that when wildfire occurs up to or beyond severe fire weather conditions, we want to have fire on the ground. That's one of the most critical objectives that we have, because then you have trees that will live through that disturbance, and the seed source will remain, and you'll still have a forest. So I was very pleased that we met that objective with this inventory and the way that it's marked. Torching index and crowning index are two interesting metrics that we talk a lot about oftentimes. And basically, so torching, it's, as Rob referenced, just when you have surface fire occurring and it jumps up into a tree and that one tree torches or a couple trees torch. But you don't have active crown fire running. It's just here and there a tree will pop. Pre-treatment, 0 miles an hour, just not even much of a breeze, and you're going to have torching with the current conditions. Post-treatment, that's raised up to about 24 miles per hour. Crowning index, as you can imagine, it's just how windy does it have to be for that once a tree torches to actually have wildfire move actively from crown to crown and have this high severity wildfire event that we're all trying to avoid. So we raised our crowning index from about 20 miles per hour to just about 50 miles per hour. Which I wonder, this is a pretty windy place, so I wonder if 50 miles an hour is not too, yeah, exactly. One thing that I will say is, with restoration, and if you look at the historical range of variability of these forests at a historical scale, there was kind of a minimum and a maximum, a little bit theoretically, where you'd have no trees up to a certain amount of trees, right? And what that maximum limit is, we can take really good guesses at it based on the biophysical site characteristics. How wet is it? What's your aspect? What's your elevation? Is it, 5 trees per group, or how would you describe that? But within that range, we strive for variability. Variability is key. We want to have a little bit of everything within reason, within a framework. And I think we did a really good job of that on the ashram property. And what I'm getting to is that in our inventory, we just so happened to have one plot where we weren't cutting any trees. That was like a 10 tree group that we left. And I'm personally feeling like our 45 square feet and our other metrics might be a little bit higher than they might be, otherwise. There had the inventory been done with different plots. So the fire simulator models, they're a really fantastic tool that we use to measure success. But at the end of the day, we also do depend a little bit on our knowledge of what we've laid out on the landscape and where that variability exists and how it exists to really understand how successful we expect to be. Actually, if you could bump back real quick. Sorry. One more. Sorry, wait, that way. Sorry, Scott. One more. There we go. Okay, I just wanted to speak to this really quickly. So with NRCS and the conservation districts, when funding is involved, there are objectives that we need to be certain that we're meeting. And these are just 2 brief little excerpts, about what guides our work. And I don't know if I want to read it or not, but basically, if we're trying to reduce wildfire risk, we are agreeing that we will, as I said, create conditions that support surface fire and up to severe fire weather conditions. We also have habitat where if we say that we're going to improve wildlife habitat, that means that our basal area has to be under 50 square feet to get the sort of herbaceous response that's going to support, a diverse, wildlife habitat. Okay. Okay, so just this is kind of our summarized desired condition statement. What is this all going to look like, when we're done? So we want to see a forest where trees are mostly occurring in small groups with grassy openings, not just openness, but openings. And we want to have diversity in size and age classes of trees. Increased variability in forest structure to support a variety of wildlife niches. And just like Rob was saying, we have a homogeneous forest type where all the trees are mostly of the same species, mostly of the same age, and we're trying to create variability from that homogeneous forest structure. And lastly, a forest that supports low severity wildfire. That's really what we're going for. Okay, I think now, yeah. Yeah. And then, I think we're all available for questions if there are any.
So if the goal is getting diversity, which sounds like a good idea to me, are you going to do anything actively, like planting other species of trees that maybe aren't there right now to kind of improve that diversity, that kind of thing?
We typically don't plan to do that. That's always an option at the kind of the end of a project, but those pictures that Rob had up of the grass, that occurred with no seeding. So even though there's not very much grass in a dense forest currently, the grass seed is there, and if we give it the chance, it'll germinate. And that diversity really does come about on its own. But as far as tree species, this idea of assisted migration is very interesting to me, but I think typically I've never done anything like that. As Rob was saying, ponderosa pine was the dominant tree species out here. You had Doug fir, lodgepole pine, limber pine occurring in pockets and in fire-safe spaces, but it's ponderosa pine that's best adapted to the site and adapted to those dry, low-severity wildfire conditions. So we are striving for diversity in a variety of metrics, but as far as tree species go, we're really trying to push the dominance towards ponderosa pine.
Is there aspen that might come back?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Tell us about aspen.
Yeah, tell us about
Yeah, aspen's really cool. I think actually, sure.
Zoom can see.
Yep. Oh. Aspen is actually a really cool organism. I don't know how many of you know, but it's mostly clonal. It grows from its roots, and even when you see it disappear off the landscape, usually because too many conifers have grown up around it, they suppress the aspen, and the aspen goes back underground. That root system is still there, so when we go back to cut through there, that aspen's going to resprout. It also, we might, I don't think we're planning on doing any of this in this project, but we will also cut a couple of trunks of aspen in order to elicit a hormonal response, which actually provides more growth in the understory for aspen. So yeah, we should see a whole bunch of aspen come up. We see when we were marking this project and walking around these properties, you see little stems and sticks of aspen every so often, and in some of those lodgepole areas, we're gonna cut a whole bunch of trees, and all that is gonna spring right up.
So
Yeah.
are the aspen then exempt from the inventory of the forest? I mean, are you counting that as part of the density of the pre-treated forest or not?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
We did include it in the inventory, yeah, and we would have the data not prepared, but we could show you, what amount of our trees that were in that inventory were aspen.
Uh-huh. But your preference is to leave most of the aspen?
Certainly, yeah.
Aspen is very fire resistant,
Right.
even fire retardant
Right.
in some cases.
And we actually didn't even mark, so as I was saying earlier, we do a keep tree mark where we'll go through and every tree we want to keep, we'll put it with blue flagging. And we actually don't even do that with aspen because it's just by default we're going to keep them.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts, regarding the grasses that come back? Because now we have mostly brome, which is a patching grass, versus a lot of the bunch grasses that were native here before, and possibly different fire behaviors.
Definitely. And that is that is always going to be an issue. I don't know about, cheatgrass as far as being able to mitigate it, but weed management is definitely a part of the plans that we write. And what we tell landowners, expect that weeds are going to come in and expect to try to manage those. So
Browsers or something, or?
Browsers or even
Low severity wildfire.
low severity wildfire.
Yeah.
So, I think being upfront about this, we're probably not going to surprise anybody when we say, a mechanical treatment is more or less a Band-Aid. What we have are forests that are not functioning the way they used to. And, if we can create a forest structure that supports low severity wildfire, oftentimes it's infeasible to implement broadcast burning for a lot of different reasons, but I tell every landowner we work with, if you're ever approached by somebody in fire who says, hey, we can give you prescribed, safe broadcast burn, I always say strongly consider it, because that's really what we need at a landscape scale to have healthy, thriving forests.
Right, as I said, we're not trying to stop fire. We've been trying to stop fire for 160 years. What we're trying to do is reduce the damage that fire causes when it does come through.
Yeah, and more specifically about with the brome, it's, as far as I'm aware, I haven't heard anybody has been able to remove brome.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, maybe it could be done, but yeah, I would imagine you're going to get higher surface flame lengths compared with your native bunch grasses. So taking a little bit, of wisdom from the fuels reduction approach and limbing up your trees, especially your most beautiful trees that you absolutely don't want to lose. That would be how I would deal with the brome, is just leave it be and limb your trees up.
Can someone say what is brome?
Sorry, it's an annual grass. It was native to Europe and Asia. That was brought over here, I believe, for cattle grazing. And it's very prolific.
I imagine most of what's outside.
It's the taller grasses we have around the block.
Yeah.
I like that better than the little clumpies.
Will the equipment that's coming in be weed-free or cleaned so that they're not tracking in stuff when they come to do the work?
That is a good question.
You can ask them to do that.
We can
Absolutely, yeah.
Require them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
We do require that in all of our contracts that we have with contractors.
Cool. Great.
How do they do that?
There are standards dictated by, I forget who dictates the standard, but they can power wash it, heated power wash it.
Yeah, I think we'll need to provide a space for them to do that. Hopefully they can do it where the machines are before they bring them here. But we can talk with the loggers, and if they, for some reason, even though they shouldn't, transport their machines, dirty, we can provide a space where we can, clean the machines. We'll expect to have some weeds there, and then we can deal with it in a more localized manner. Yeah.
I was just curious about the pine beetle and how it behaves when you thin the woods like this.
Sure. So my master's thesis was actually on pine beetle ecology.
Excellent.
So I'll just
Let someone else answer that.
Normally in a functioning, healthy ecosystem, even up in the subalpine where there's tons of trees, bark beetles will tend to attack stressed out trees, ones that have already been attacked by a disease, ones that are drought stressed, things like that. So a tree that isn't able to defend itself, and they'll mass attack that one tree. So you'll get one tree here, 3 trees there, like you would expect with torching. In a wildfire, one tree here, 3 trees there, they burn up, but you've got an entire forest around them. In the case of like 2003, when the bark beetles came through, we had a particularly dry year. We had too many trees in the forest that were all just the right size for bark beetles. They were all 60, 80-year-old trees that were bigger than 8 to 10 inches, which is exactly what they love. And they were drought stressed. They probably had mistletoe or whatever, so they couldn't defend themselves, and we just saw them sweep right through. So we expect that through this mitigation, the trees will be less stressed because there's less competition for them, and they should be able to handle a bark beetle.
So what happens with all the slash then? Did I hear you get, that's gonna be burned, or will that be ground, or?
Sure, yeah, I guess I'll say, really there's no cheap way to deal with it.
Can you say what slash is?
So, yes, thank you. The tops of the trees and the branches, basically the non-merchantable biomass we would consider slash, and there's a lot of it out there. Broadcast burning, it would be the best way to deal with slash, but we're not going to tackle that on this project, unfortunately. On the north slope of the Ashram property, where we have the switchback road, Paul with the 4 Mile Mitigation crew, his crew, they're actually going to, they're going to lop and scatter the understory trees that are under 5 inches in diameter, and the slash from the overstory trees, they're going to pile and burn on that road. So I'm very excited about that. On the remainder of the Ashram property, some of those details haven't been worked out yet, and same with the Caroline's property, the details haven't quite been worked out yet. But I'm very excited that we're going to have use of this tub grinder, where we're actually going to be able to remove a lot of that biomass. Prior to working here up in the Longmont field office, I spent the last 4 years doing forest restoration projects down in Jefferson County, and it's very infeasible to even burn slash piles down there for a variety of reasons, and the chipping and hauling tends to be cost prohibitive. So on most of my forestry projects, we masticated the slash, which is, you can have a tractor, a skid steer with a rotating hydraulic drum with teeth on it that just chews everything up. It'll incorporate a little bit into the soil, but basically it'll leave that chunky, slash material on site, which, it'll delay the herbaceous response by a couple of years. There's a carbon nitrogen imbalance, and it's, can act a little bit as a mulch layer. So there can be downsides, but typically, at least in Jefferson County, that was the most feasible slash management strategy. The last project that I had down there before I came up here, flat ground, just golf course acres. It was great. And we fully expected that project to be a chip and haul with a tub grinder, and because there was good access. The bids came back like $10,000 an acre, which was just like, that's a bid where they're like, we don't want to do this, but we'll do it if you pay us $1 million or whatever. So with this tub grinder up here, I'm just very excited that we'll be able to do some of that, but there will likely be mastication in some areas too.
And I just wanted to add, sorry, real quick, that when piles are burned, they are burned when there is snow on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And they are monitored by the fire crew. They burn a lot of piles in 4 Mile and around, so they will only be burned under the proper conditions and with experienced personnel.
Isn't it like a year or so later they have to wait?
They have to cure, right, so everything has to dry out, so it'll probably, if they're being built now, then they wouldn't be burned until at least 2022. Next winter, yeah.
Can you talk about the timing of this project?
Go ahead. We hope to start cutting trees this summer.
Next week.
Next week with the 4 Mile crew. Yeah.
The 4 Mile fire crew is ready to start, sorry. The 4 Mile fire crew is ready to start on the ashram property. They're going to start on those steepest switchbacks in the next couple of weeks. So they'll be working there, and then these guys are also preparing a request for proposal for us to acquire bids from contractors for Caroline's property and the remaining portions of the ashram property. And so once we get those, we'll have a better idea of timeline and cost.
Yeah, now that we're doing all this is, we're ready to send that RFP out in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we have what we call a show me tour early July. And then, once we select the contractor, the timeline is a little bit in their court, because they might have a project that they need to finish up or something. But yeah, things are happening.
So you expect the project to start very soon to fairly soon.
Yes.
How long do you expect it to last? And what's the maximum number of people will be working on the project from the outside here? And how long do you see the duration of that maximum number? That's one set of questions. And that's another set of questions. Another question, which is, there's been a lot of conversation over all the years that I've been here that the greatest fire danger to Gold Hill comes from Left-Hand Canyon. Is this project created to take care of that problem? Have we solved the problem when this job is done, or have we just done part of the solution? So I'd like you to just pose both of those questions.
Well, I guess I want to answer the second part, kind of in a maybe funny way. So down in Jefferson County, there was a recent wildfire. It ended up only being about 30 acres, but it was very close to one of my past forestry projects. And I was talking to my girlfriend, and I said, I'm a little anxious to see what happens if wildfire runs through my project. And she said, wait, wildfire is going to be in your project. I thought you were getting rid of that. Do the landowners know? And I was like, yes, they do know that. We're not excluding wildfire. We're trying to prepare to receive wildfire. So wildfire will come, and I expect our project will do very well. But it will require maintenance, and it will require just the more preparation we can do in terms of working on other nearby properties would only be to the benefit of future wildfire behavior.
So I'm wondering if you have a map that shows really specifically the untreated properties and what is their plan to deal with them? And is that the map that you showed?
Well, the answer to the second part of your
How far east does this go down Left-Hand Canyon as protection to go as vis-a-vis where Gold Hills was a little hard for me to see on that. And I still have the first question.
Yeah. The answer to the second question is absolutely not. It does not get rid of the risk for Gold Hill. And in addition to the forestry work, there is so much work that needs to be happening, on structures and around structures in order to reduce your risk of wildfire there. What they're seeing happening is that structures are burning because of embers blowing, from miles down. So really focusing on your structures is going to be really important as well. But you are correct that Left-Hand Canyon and this whole north slope will still be a risk, and we are treating only 100 acres. So there still is a lot more work that needs to happen, and we're really hoping that this project and having you all here today can catalyze more work and more landowners. And there is significant movement. There has been significant movement in the state legislature this year to allocate more money towards grant programs through the State Forest Service to be directed towards projects like this on private land. And there is a huge collaboration happening across the whole Northern Front Range right now with all of the agencies here and more to really look at things from that landscape scale, so that we don't kind of get fooled into thinking that if we do this, we're good. But first part of the question.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as I'm aware, there are going to be at least 3 contractors working on the project at any given time. There will be some overlap as well. That's the 4-mile mitigation crew, that's the operator of the Boulder County tub grinder, and that's this third to-be-determined contracting company. It's certainly possible that there could be another company that could become involved, although I would not expect that. This kind of third company, they're going to have machines, probably about 4 machines, operated by maybe 6 people would be my guess. That's pretty typical. And the timelines are highly variable. We don't have a very robust timber industry in Colorado because the trees grow short and they grow slow, and they just don't really produce a whole lot of marketable product. It's not like we don't have any industry here. There is enough industry where we can actually remove the logs from our projects, but there's not, this isn't the Pacific Northwest where you can make a lot of money in logging, so there's not a lot of companies out there who I'll say can do this work very quickly, unfortunately. there are more companies around here, especially, as Maya said, there's movement in state legislature, and more of this work has been subsidized, in probably the last 10 years than, any era before. So, big companies from around the West are taking notice, and they're coming in, and they can do work quickly. I would say that the fastest, and I always regret throwing out these guesses, but 2 months would probably be the fastest that this whole thing could be done. I already regret it.
That says, well, if that was done within a year,
Yeah.
which would to me be pretty ambitious to get this job.
A year? Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then it sounded like about 20 to 30 people.
No, the 4 Mile Fire Crew has seasonals right now, so they are between 5 people and 10 people. And then, that's the reason that bigger equipment is sometimes better. It's fewer people and it's faster. And that's the efficiency that comes. And
So
cheaper.
not that many people.
Right.
And then the grinder is a machine that comes with one guy who operates the excavator.
Can you just real quickly describe what a tub grinder is?
Yeah, it's just a big machine, and I actually haven't seen this one that we've been talking about, but sometimes they have like a horizontal conveyor belt type of system, or sometimes they have like an opening on the top where you can have some sort of loader or some sort of grapple or claw that just feeds / into it, and it just produces a chip.
So how big is big? 20 feet in diameter?
Maybe 20 feet in length, 12 feet tall, 12 feet wide would be my guess. I don't know if anyone has better guesses.
Half a room.
Half the room, great, yeah.
And is it sort of slow grinding, or is it a?
It can happen really fast, so we
But I mean, the
stack it.
actual mechanic. There, I assume there's a wheel that's spinning.
There's a wheel. I wouldn't say it's slow. Yeah, it's not like super fast, but it's chugging along pretty well. Yeah.
Probably somewhere between like a chipper.
Yeah, like a chipper goes really fast.
Right, it's probably a little slower than that.
So likely what they'll do is they'll have a big slash pile where limbs and tops, and they'll have like some feeder logs kind of where they'll jam a bunch of slash in there and then take maybe a 8-inch diameter log and just shove it right in there. So
Just
I mean,
to
it's
push the.
yeah.
slash.
And this might only be able to happen on the Oshron property because they need a lot of space for that to happen. So I'm not clear if it's feasible yet there. Emily?
When is Caroline's property, which backs up to my house or fronts up to it, when is that gonna start? And are you gonna clean up the slash and the mess that was done the last time people came up to mitigate? It's a fire hazard as it is. It's got tons of ground cover, dead trees.
Yeah.
So as far as the brush piles that are existing out there, if we do masticate slash, with the hydraulic drum with the teeth on it, they can run over the slash piles.
I'm not happy about that.
Right,
I'm not
so-
happy about the traffic and tearing up the tree, the ground, because I'm afraid of the weeds.
Yeah.
The weeds are terrible where there has been fire.
The weeds will come, as you know, and they're.
And they'll invade my little plot,
Yeah.
which they already have.
So I think an important perspective to take, I believe, is the comparison of the forest as you have now compared with the forest you'll have immediately post-project is, in my opinion, not the right perspective. It's what will fire do to your forest now compared with what will your forest look like after a project. So these projects are not perfect. We do have slash, and like Rob was saying, we make a little bit of a mess, but that mess is an investment because what we want to have is life on the ground, living trees and living plants. Because as the
And the other thing you
In
talked
towns.
about was the aspens, and I just want to say that they did a cut years ago out west of Gold Hill near Rocky Point, and that was to mitigate something, I don't know what, but they cut a lot of trees, like the whole thing.
Okay.
And we got aspens, and they all grew this tall, because they're so close together. I have aspens all around my house, they're coming up all the time, and I take them out.
Okay.
Because I don't want them everywhere. They have leaves and those fall on the ground, and then if it's in a place where that can catch fire, they'll catch fire, you know, so you have to get rid of the leaves, and that's a lot of work.
It is.
But I've had them, I've lived there for 40 years. My aspens are on the way out. I have some really big ones, and the small ones the moose ate, and so who knows. But I don't have any of these because I pull them out of the ground.
Okay.
And that's what will grow. And if they grow like that, they won't get tall and big and nice because it's too thick.
I would expect it's actually maybe not from how dense they are, but it's more from being browsed by moose and elk and things like that.
Fence them out.
Fence them out, yeah. And
Fence out in my yard, but they jump over the fence.
yeah, gotta scare the moose away.
That's for moose,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, can I say one more thing about weeds real quick? That the Watershed Collective, you know, is committed to the long-term health of the watershed. And, you know, I've heard Frank say before that, you know, maybe 1 to 3 years after the land is disturbed is when the weeds typically come. And then because we're allowing more sunlight in, then eventually the natives start to push that out. Not always, and sometimes there are issues that come up in certain areas with certain types of plants. And we would be happy to, you know, we would like to know about those areas. And we've done the same thing with our river projects for flood recovery, where we go back annually and we look at the vegetation that is there and look at, you know, any areas that might be of concern with weeds. And we often have volunteers going in and hand pulling weeds.
Mullen and sheepgrass.
Yeah, you can have a lot of success if you really get after it in the first couple of years. Yeah. Sorry, I want to go to Sita. She's sorry. Yeah.
I think almost all of my questions have been answered.
Okay.
My last question was, the timing was one, and then weeds. We're gonna have a tremendous amount of thistle. We get this nice little postcard from Boulder County every year saying, we've got noxious weeds. You don't take care of them, we'll charge you and we'll take care of them. So will they give us a dispensation for not having, we can't deal with all the thistle that's gonna grow.
Sure. So my understanding, and you know, I'm new to Boulder County, so maybe it's different up here, but they can require the removal of List A noxious weeds, but not anything else. And I don't know of any List A noxious weeds around here.
Is thistle not one of them?
I believe that's List B, so I don't think they would. I don't think they would require you to move it or fine you for not moving it. I would apologize if I'm wrong.
Every year that says they're gonna fine us.
Really?
Thistle and what's that other thing with the little
Leafy
spurge?
spurge.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We should talk about that.
Does the
Yeah.
thistle just automatically, because we have that big circle that was treated a decade ago, and originally it was all thistle, and now it's all grass. So does the thistle just eventually just disappear and the grass grows up?
I wouldn't want to say it kind of disappears, but it, you know, it can be outcompeted by the grasses, especially a brome. But what you had was musk thistle, which is far more desirable than Canada thistle. It's a biennial species that propagates by seed. Canada thistle is way tougher because it lives really long, and it's really similar to aspen, and that has a real solid root mass and can draw on those energy reserves for who knows how long. So musk thistle never worries me. Musk thistle is very easy to get rid of. Canada thistle takes a much bigger effort.
You can also eat thistles, so if you want to do it that
There you go.
Hey, you guys mentioned that on the Ashram property, you're gonna pile, slash, and burn it a year or two later. Are you not doing that on the Ashley property?
I think to be determined. What do you
Yes.
think?
We're hoping that,
Well,
it
great.
depends on how much is left after we haul everything out. Yeah.
There's enough there now.
But the intention is there to clean.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To do whatever we
Such
need
a
to do
mess.
to get rid of the slash.
And then second, if there's neighboring landowners who want to get involved in the short term, is there a window, or are they gonna have to wait years?
I think there's a window. What do you think?
Yeah, so one thing,
It'd be any part of this project.
so,
Thank you.
one thing that will help us determine how much funding there is to stretch out across other properties is getting the proposals from the contractor. So that will help us understand better the cost and how many acres we can do with that cost. And of course, we want to expand that if there's room to do that. Additionally, we have put in another grant. We've put in multiple grants around for other areas around town. And if there are other landowners who, who have not been part of that planning already, who would like to be, we would love to talk to them.
And on that note, I want to say Vanessa, Ben, and Scott, the conservation districts, can write forest management plans this summer. So if you're interested in a forest management plan, give Vanessa a call, and Ben and Scott, and yeah, you can make that happen.
But nothing on national or state forest? It has to be private land?
Well, so the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service is aware that this project is happening, and they have done a lot of work west of town. And so we definitely are in conversation with them to see where we can continue to work west of town and leverage the work that they've done, or build projects together with them. So that's definitely in conversation for future areas out there. I don't think there is any state forest land around here.
Well, what is the
No.
land?
Where else would be able to next to it?
BLM, yes. BLM we have been having conversations with about Lick Skillet. So that's definitely a potential.
You say you are in communication with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big part of the work we do is coordinating, especially with the Watershed Collective that has been recently established. Just a group of organizations like ours that are working together to try to coordinate these sorts of projects.
Across those lands, especially
Right.
here where there's choppy land ownership.
And also one more thing, that the community visioning events, or the community kind of conversations that we're going to try and host later this summer, part of that is spatially trying to understand where some of the priority areas are for the community. So so stay posted on that. We'll have that on the website.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up too is Wildfire Partners is a really, really great organization that, this work is getting done, and obviously it's so important to do this, but, we sort of spoke a little bit to, the work we can do on our own properties, and how do we make this a success for overall. You have this Ember Wash. Well, Wildfire Partners, you should get in contact with them if you haven't already, and they will come up and they'll take a look at your property personally. Acreage-wise, that's sort of another avenue, but your home, there's a lot of really simple things you can do for your home, especially upcoming. And I'll talk to you about it personally, but there's a lot you can do, and they're a great organization that can make that very streamlined for you. So you should really take advantage of that. So anyway, sorry, just wanted to pop that in.
So piggyback on that a little bit, people have said at times that they don't want Wildfire Partners coming on their property because they're afraid they're going to tell them that they have to do stuff and it's going to get really expensive, and then they're going to get penalized and all that kind of stuff. That's not what happens. It's a negotiated process between the landowner and the Wildfire Partners, and they give you a suggested plan, and you negotiate, and they tell you why they think you should remove certain things and change species and all that kind of thing, but it's not a forced, you gotta do this, and we're gonna hammer you if you don't.
And that's an important.
do anything.
It's not regulatory. It's not regulatory at
There's a
all.
homeowner here.
Your insurance company might make it.
Yeah.
Something
That's-
that's separate.
They'll say,
But they'll give
they're
you
gonna do that
They'll
to you
give you
anyway.
certification.
Yeah, that does bring up I just want to make a really quick comment that NRCS and the conservation districts were not regulatory at all. It's completely a voluntary based type of thing. So yeah, we don't tell anybody what they need to do.
Okay,
So
Julian in the back.
I was told to pass on a question from someone else who couldn't make it. But is there a way to get firewood from these projects? And how would people in Gold Hill, or maybe even outside of Gold Hill, because my landlord wants some, how would they be able to access that?
We are still working out the details for firewood, but yes, we want to make firewood available to people in Gold Hill for sure. And we're kind of working with the town and the fire district on how to work out those logistics. So more to come on how to actually access that. Paul?
Hey, can I ask Chris, right?
Yes.
Can you describe a little bit what it's like trying to fight fire and protect Gold Hill when there's been a thinned forest you're anticipating versus one that as it is currently and what you're facing?
I would say that you know, you walk into certain forests, and I've fought fires across the nation and seen different fuel types and everything. If anybody can go to Flagstaff, Arizona, we call it firecation because some of those forests there are managed so well. And as a firefighter, it's a relief when you walk into an area like that. You're like, whew, okay, we can hold here, we can do this, we can actually make it work. And a lot of the times we don't stay very long there because the forests are so well managed that you can go in and they're like, yeah, we needed you last week, but we got it now. And you can do it with far less people. You can have burn operations that are really successful, and you know, speaking to the ecology of it, it's just immensely important and also really successful. Looking at Gold Hill as like protecting it, it's a really scary prospect, to be totally honest with you. And if you watch anything or have ever seen Ember Wash or anything, you know, yeah, that's why these light fuels on our homes, and that's kind of what I was going to bring up too. Make sure your gutters are clean, stuff's off your porch, like really simple things that I think if everybody's lived here long enough, wood piles not next to your house. Your insurance companies make you rip off all your siding and replace it with cement board or whatever. Yeah, it's very important. But after the mitigation, to the point, after the mitigation is done, I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable as a firefighter going into those areas and actually knowing we can actually put a line in and it will work. Right? Keeping fire on the ground is so important. And when these thinning projects go in, that's such a huge part of it. A running crown fire, we don't do anything. As a firefighter, you literally can't. You know, so the importance of this, to stress that, I know, you know, we're all staying positive about this, and it's just so important that this is getting started this summer, and we should continue to look at this, you know. There's no perfect solution to everything, and there's goods and bads to all of it, but community coming together and supporting this and having the support and work of all of you folks is just incredible. So let's get it done sooner than later, okay? Yeah.
Thanks.
Steve?
Yeah, is Boulder County involved at all, especially, could they contribute to thinning along Lickskillet, create a bigger fire break there?
I have talked with Stephen Reinhold, who's the forester for Parks and Open Space, about that area, because the fire district kind of prioritized Lickskillet as an escape route, which I think is in your CWPP also. But so yes, I've had preliminary conversations with Boulder County and the BLM about working together and to tie into our project there, so it's all one cohesive project that can go move all the way to Lickskillet. So that has none of that has been finalized. You know, if it did happen, it probably wouldn't be until at least 2022. But everybody is open to that, and I think us driving the work here, getting that work started, will create the momentum there as well.
Is that like everything west of Lickskillet?
There's
along
some
left hand?
Yeah, there's Boulder County owns a lot along the lower part of Lickskillet, and then the BLM owns some on the top part, closer to town, and then there's a few private parcels in there as well. Yeah. Marcus?
So I just wanted to say that the town meeting has gotten a grant of almost $30K for work on adjacent properties, kind of to match from the community foundation. And the idea has been both supporting some mitigation on individual properties, but also, you know, kind of a cleanup wildfire mitigation week for here, you know, get a batch of dumpsters, possibly some grinding stuff, that sort of thing. So there are opportunities that's just come through, just to supplement.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.